So welcome everybody to the XDS webinar series. My name is Chris Wren. I'm the chair of the XDS Advisory Committee. I'm also the head of XDI events with EA. So a number of you have probably attended XDS events over the years. If not, XDS is the only international event focused on external development with the support of our fantastic advisory committee. The main event is held each September in Vancouver, Canada, bringing the industry together to share knowledge, network effectively, and build a community of practice. I'll mention quickly that we are going to continue delivering free webinars that are relevant to today's global health crisis. Next Tuesday, in fact, if you'll indulge me for a quick shameless plug, I'll be hosting a session on managing external development in the new normal with members of our XDS advisory committee members. And I will post a link in the chat so you guys can take a look at that later and feel free to register for that session. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Jon Jones, Art Outsourcing Manager and Art Producer. Jon delivered a talk at XDS 2014 on tools of the globetrotting freelancer, which contained a great many tips and tricks on how to be an effective remote worker. And Jon, I still use many of those today, so thank you. And obviously, given this global health situation, those tools could not be more relevant today. Just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Jon would love to take your questions and comments at the end of his presentation, which is about 30 minutes. When the time comes, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom. Hopefully you can all find that. And first come, first serve, I will take you off mute and you can pose your question or state your comment for Jon, and we should have a good amount of time for Q&A towards the end. Lastly, I am recording this presentation as I'd like to post it up on our XDS channels, and Jon will also be sharing the link to this content at the end of the session. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing, and Mr. Jones, I'm going to pass it along to you, sir.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm hoping this handoff and share goes quickly, because how good will it look for me presenting this if it doesn't? All right, is that displaying all right for you?
Yes, it is. Thank you, Jon.
Splendid. Thanks so much, Chris. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to come watch me talk about our weird new normal. So I'm not going to delve too much into the specific realities of it, but frankly, I've spent most of my career doing remote work, and I think it's cool. I think it's fun and interesting and compelling to be able to have control enough over your career and what you do and what you choose to do and spend your time doing, and to be able to have that happen at home in your own space, on your own terms to some extent, and to be able to manage that responsibly on an ongoing basis where you're meeting expectations, you know what's coming next, and you're able to create a kind of stability in a new situation that you may not have been exposed to before. So I'm going to go through a few different aspects of what makes remote work and how to really excel and distinguish yourself as a truly excellent remote worker, or a remote work superhero, as it were. So first, a little bit about me. So I've been working in games since 2001 on over 50 titles. I started as an artist, and then gradually started specializing in managing outsourced art. So I've worked inside all these tools. I've trained artists, I've trained producers. A lot of the work that I've done professionally has been adapting to using the tools of different development teams, often remotely, and just having, through virtue of needing to survive, having to get really, really good at using them, understanding how they fit together, and building teams of consensus around process and tools. So I've seen a lot of the ways that remote work can succeed and fail. And I'm gonna be drawing on some of those anecdotes as I go through this, viewed through the lens of how can you be a remote work superhero and really just absolutely crush this opportunity, because things will go back to a form of normal soon, and remote work is not gonna go away. That is not a bell that can unring. And if you can really distinguish yourself and really take the bull by the horns and make this work, this could be something that lasts beyond the thing we're going through right now. So I'm going to be going over 6 remote work superpowers. And the first being omnipresence. essentially being everywhere, living in all of the tools that are used on the project, and the art of being in the first place people look when they need you. The second is SuperSpeed and responsiveness, and being able to use the technological edge and self-discipline to be a reliable remote resource. Omniscience, just the act of knowing everything, knowing the processes that of which you are a part, but in addition to that, knowing who feeds you, who's upstream from you, and where does your work product go after you're done working on it. Building up that level of organizational awareness frankly, there's no reason not to do it, but there are a lot of very compelling reasons to do that it can make or break remote work, essentially. The fourth is vigilance and the security postures and habits you'll need to start establishing for this. I'll do a minimal of tut finger wagging there, but the security is something I've always been very focused on. And then foresight, what to plan for and how to recover from things going wrong at home, like from a hardware level or internet going out or something, or just something going wrong, because you no longer have IT, you no longer have facilities. You're responsible for a lot more than you were when you were still working in a studio. And to a great extent, it's your own hardware and it's your own responsibility. So there's a few things to plan for. And then finally, regeneration, or how to make this sustainable and how to focus on self-care to get you through this, instead of creating an environment where you're always at work or always at play or never really quite both. Because I've through each of these attributes that I've identified as room for, as a superpower, I have face planted on every single one of these and seen all of these failures. So you'll learn from my bruises. So first, video call tradecraft. I wanted to open with this because this is the main thing that I see a lot of people kind of falling down on. So a few things. First, look at the camera, look into the camera lens, not at their faces. This is kind of a minor thing, but I appreciate the difference. And I was actually kind of shocked when I started working with people that made a habit of doing that, because it felt like I was making more of an actual connection with the person instead of just staring at their face moving across the screen. 10-minute cutoff for no-shows. Sometimes people don't show up on time, and there needs to be a hard rule in place for cutting that off and minimizing time waste. Because if you have like 3, 5, 10 people sitting in a room sitting in a virtual meeting room waiting for that amount of time, and that's a ridiculous amount of time to waste. So if you have a quick rule, for my rule it's 10 minutes. If you're not there in 10 minutes, we'll reschedule. Some studios, there's maybe a little bit more slack. Sometimes the meetings are more last minute. So I had a rule once, for internal people, I'll wait 10. For external people, I'll wait 15. But in any case, have a rule just so that doesn't get out of control. Buy and use a laptop camera cover, and always leave it covered. Only take it off when you actually need it, because Zoom and Teams and other tools like that can remotely enable your camera. As I discovered this week, I had a connection issue with Teams, and when it reconnected, even though I disabled my camera, it re-enabled it without asking me. Always leave that covered, and be very, very careful about it. The things that I've seen in the background of people's homes, you don't want to be the person that people are talking about. Always also stay muted unless speaking. Always. There's so much background noise that goes on, especially MacBook microphones are notorious. So we can hear the pets in the background. We can hear the dishwasher going. We can hear kids. We can hear the howls of the damned in the backyard or wherever you live. Always keep it muted unless you are speaking. Everybody should do this. Nothing wastes more time than that when someone is trying to speak and they're getting an echo or hearing something in the background, getting distracted. Just be respectful, be reasonable, but always stay muted unless speaking. Also, before getting in a video call, I would recommend fire up Hangouts or Zoom or whatever, and take a screenshot of what your camera is recording without you in it, and see if there's anything in the camera's frame of view that people shouldn't see, such as wall posters or dirty dishes or calendars that are not suitable for work. These things happen. I have seen them. It's such a small thing, but do it. Also, always wear pants, because you can tell by someone's face. I'm kind of half joking, but you've heard the old phrase, for telemarketers, always smile when you're speaking because they can hear it in your voice. I fully believe there's an analog for I'm not wearing pants face on a video call. Always wear pants, be respectful. And screen sharing advice. This is something I see missed a lot. Hide your bookmarks bar. In Chrome, Control-Shift-B. On a Mac, Command-Shift-B. It'll toggle your bookmarks bar. People don't need to see that in a screen share, and you can learn a lot about people. Always sanitize your open tabs, your desktop, your open windows. Make sure there's nothing open that people shouldn't see. I've seen like a lot of bank details or people applying for work or just weird, like, just weird personal hobby stuff that I don't need to see in a screen share. Also, when you're screen sharing, share only the window and not the entire screen, because that's another opportunity for things to flutter into view that need not be seen. So omnipresence. So this is the thing that I hammer home and again and again and again. 90% of telepresence is being in the first place people look when they need you. So be where they look first. That's why I drill in, understand process, understand where the work is coming from and where it's going, understand your place in it. And once you understand the process and the tools well enough, then you can learn to anticipate being in the first place people look when they need you. And that is very, very helpful. Speaking as a manager, if I need an artist to be able to respond to me in a timely manner in a certain communication channel, I like knowing that, knowing I can go to that place and get a response, because that's where we communicate about these things. So one of the things that to be aware of when you're rapidly transitioning from office work to remote work is management by walking around is how a lot of managers manage, essentially. They think that if you are sitting in a seat, then you are working. But suddenly transitioning to remote work, especially if you're a management by walking around type, can feel like your senses are being severed. And that can, people handle that in different ways. Sometimes it's, do they respond within a couple minutes of me sending an email or an IM, or they over rely on meetings or dailies or quick video calls or something like that. You can assuage the concerns of a manager transitioning into a very, very new situation just by learning to be where they look first. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on that. So communication is everything, and it'll make or break your project, because all of you are now remote and you have to opt in to create a telepresence to reach out. You can't just sit there silently. You can't accept or expect work to come to you. You have to go out, you have to reach out, you have to seek it out and be there. And if for introverts, that can be a little bit difficult, especially if you're at home in a very comfortable place where you're not used to doing that. You need to learn where important conversations happen, and then you need to be there and look for ways to be able to add value. Further on omnipresence, so really dig into this. Whenever I'm starting on a new project, like we're either joining midstream or establishing how it's going to be managed and how people are going to communicate, identify the primary communication channels for these 4 primary things. Work assignments and feedback. We're actually like sending out the work that's being assigned that needs to be executed upon. A channel where general discussions or technical discussions happen, talking about a thing or around a thing or coming toward a decision that isn't necessarily actionable in the form of a work assignment. But if a discussion needs to happen, there's usually a separate place for that. So for example, Slack or Teams is where like a broader discussion would happen, but like a Trello or Jira or Shotgun or Basecamp or Asana or Monday or something like that, that's where the actual work would be assigned. So they're 2 different communication channels, but that could easily, if you're not disciplined about it, that can easily turn into, well, for every tool that I mentioned, like someone will send an email, then respond in Trello, or they'll call someone, like do something on a video call. All this information, like the assignment information or these important technical discussions, are scattershot going everywhere, and nobody can corral that communication under one hood unless everybody agrees. This is where these communication discussions happen. This is where actionable information happens. The third one, file share. Where are files that are in progress being shared? Not things that are being checked into Perforce or SVN or whatever. Just purely like working files, like a ZBrush source files or PSDs or just intermediate content in development. Where are those being shared? Because there needs to be one consistent place for that, and ideally that's coming from the management on down instead of the team volunteering to be helpful and inadvertently creating dozens of different communication channels, all trying to solve the same thing. And then finally, source control, if that's a component of it. I know a lot of IT departments are kind of overwhelmed with how many work materials can be put onto employees' home computers. I'm hearing about a lot of amazing exceptions being made in order just for continuity of operations. But ultimately, knowing where that work is ultimately going to end up as its own separate channel is an important thing to know as well. So those 4 basic communication flows for specific addressable feedback and assignments, for generalized discussions, for sharing files that are in progress before they're being committed, and then where the content actually ends up at the end of the day. And then again, there are other tools like Jira and things outside of this, but primarily these are the main types of communication they're going to have. So live there. Learn how people use those channels. Where do artists live? Where does design live? Where does engineering live? Like, are you sending artists actionable notes in Jira? Which if our artists don't like Jira in my experience. So if you're trying to communicate with an artist in Jira instead of Trello or Shotgun, for example, that creates latency. That information is not going to be transmitted because you weren't where people were looking. So understanding where your information goes, where you get information, and the tools that each of the people you work with live in, building that kind of proficiency and being extremely proactive about being there for them so they don't have to go out of their way to accommodate you, makes it a lot easier to work with you and gives you a better understanding of those data flows and those systems, which is a stepping stone toward more responsibility later, ultimately, if you choose. Other practical questions. If source control is down, who do I talk to? Or it's late, everyone's offline, I need help. Where are shared resources? Is there a Confluence? Is there a wiki somewhere? Is there like a PDF manual, or was that just taken care of by facilities and we have to worry about it now? Think about those things and try and challenge yourself to be resourceful, even if other people aren't around and you still need to get things done, just depending on time zone, depending on people needing to be out during the day, or normal real life things. The world can't stop. It can't come to a complete halt. And the tools and technology are there for us to be able to corral these processes and really make these things work efficiently. And again, a lot of this would seem obvious. Yeah, learn the tools. Learn the tools and be in the same tools as other people. But there's really a difference if you go full bore into them and learn how they work, learn these processes, learn these flows, understand the greater organization and what you're all trying to drive toward. Because it takes a village to raise a child, and it takes a dedicated team of proactive remote workers to make a remote work distributed team successful. And SuperSpeed. So again, 90% of telepresence is being in the first place people look when they need you. So be where they look first. And sometimes that's obvious, but other times you can create those expectations and establish that process. Because if there was one thing I've learned in game dev and in my experience, is if someone hasn't fully developed an idea around a certain thing, more often than not, the person that develops that takes the idea and runs with it, develops it, wins. So if you're able to set a reasonable communication standard or some kind of remote work standard for something that people aren't paying enough attention to, that's fantastic. As long as you're working in line with the organization's goals, that's proactive. That's interesting. That is a very, very that's a great opportunity to create better working conditions for yourself and others. So there are other key habits that are important, but along with responsiveness and super speed. Respond quickly in those primary channels, but be mindful of spreading yourself too thin over too many channels. I've gotten sucked into customer support burdens where I had, I think, 3 or 4 different email addresses, a Skype, an online forum, Reddit, my Twitter DMs. I was trying to manage one thing, but I had too many channels open in which I was communicative, and that wrecked me. It was very, very difficult to pull myself out of that. That's why I emphasize as few channels as reasonably possible, but know how they're used. Follow up when you say you will, and consistently use the same communication channels. Like if you're sending art feedback, don't send one in an email reply. Don't send another, the next one in Trello. Don't have the next one in like a voice chat that isn't written down anywhere. Use the same channels consistently and try and enforce that expectation on others. And everybody really has to pitch in and participate toward making that work. And you can't just be lazy and and reactive. Also, balance. You're not on call 24/7. If your team has core hours, work those core hours and stick to them, and set boundaries. Because remote work on an ongoing basis is earned, and you need to insist on creating sustainable work conditions for yourself, because that does not happen accidentally. Set those core hours, but be respectful of your own time, your family, like your life, your pets, your interests, the things that you do. Make sure that it doesn't become this creeping thing so that work follows you home and never leaves. Remote work can be joyful, but you have to set boundaries and be realistic about what you will and won't accept. And you have to fight for yourself. You have to be your own advocate, and it's your right to, because there is going to be a new normal, and there's going to be a lot more remote work. And if you can really just nail it during this weird time and be one of the people that just has their stuff together, then this could be an ongoing thing for you. What if you work fully remote from now on, or partially remote? At least now you'll have set the standard that if you asked and wanted to go in that direction, you can point to how reliable you were and how hard you tried, and say, like, look, I made this work based on these conditions. So advocate for yourself. Omniscience. Know everything. So this is a big part of the organizational understanding that again, I'm drilling in over and over and over. It is your responsibility to understand process. And it is to your benefit if you understand process outside of yourself, to understand the broader data flows. So, where do ideas begin? How do they who do they filter through? How do those come to you? Then what happens after you're done with the work, after you stop thinking about it? How much more is there to be done? And how can you facilitate that? How can you make that better or easier? So understand who's upstream, who's downstream, what tools do different teams live in? Can you live in those tools? Is there a reason for you to be in there, or just at least have a broad understanding of what is expected, so that maybe you can stage something to be a little bit easier to work with for somebody downstream in a way that they didn't expect because they didn't know your portion of the process. So ask yourself, where will the highest priority contributions be noticed first? And how can my thoroughness be easy to verify? So if you know the communication channels, you know how people communicate, who communicates with who, where they live and why, then you can start identifying high value places to be and start improving your little corner of the world in remote work land, wherever that may be. And communication, knowing everything and being able to clearly communicate everything are very, very different. So all information must create its own context. And this is in the context of giving feedback, in an art way, giving art feedback, because that's my background. But broadly speaking, this applies to everything communicative. So document A should not require documents B, C, and D to make sense, ideally. When you're referring to something, use proper nouns and be specific. I don't know who he, she, it, they, that, then, or where is, but I know Bob, Alice. I know that file name. I know that folder path. I know where that particular shared drive is. Always be specific, and you need to anticipate that individual pieces of information are going to be removed from their context. Even if it's an email attachment, someone will forward it or save it, or the file name will be changed, or will be screenshotted, or will be removed from its original context. So it is upon you to make sure that every individual piece of information you're transmitting to other people establishes that context, even if it's removed. Always save and include images and never link them, because links break. So if you're giving a specific image reference or specific feedback, always save that image and include it in the whatever file transfer channel you're using. Use specific file names and absolute folder locations absolutely constantly. And cite all sources and references, including web links. So this would be here's the history of Venetian buttresses. It's link to a Wikipedia article or the website for that, for example. And also, this is something I want to emphasize for managers. I've used this to great effect in organizations. I document edge cases. So I've my entire career has been managing artists, and they're constantly developing new ways of working, either more efficient ways of working or working around certain problems, or just developing new processes on the fly. and they have their own form of shorthand and way of documenting and communicating that. However, asking an artist to actually create documentation around that is a whole other thing, and nobody really likes writing documentation. But if you ask and incentivize everyone on the team to just write these things down as they occur in just a simple way, like on a page on Confluence, just say like, hey, here's a faster way to export or polyreduce or work around this thing. Just keep an artist shorthand, and then I go back and clean it up later, or I'll follow back up with them. But the idea is I have a shared scratch pad to capture all of these emerging concepts and ideas and techniques and processes as they're happening, without creating the burden of, oh God, I have to sit down and write documentation. So over time, you can actually incrementally build knowledge in that way using this ongoing scratch pad. And that scales extremely well in a remote work situation, since you're not asking for documentation, you're just asking for like, hey, click this button, here's a screenshot, boom, done. It's a very small ask, but over time, that's extremely powerful. And I turn those into like style guides or technical documentation that I send to external partners. So all documents should be living, and that's one way to get really high quality documents that increase in value over time. But you have to impress the idea across your organization that it's your responsibility to write these things down. Just don't make it a huge thing. Just put it down, and we'll come back to it and clean it up. Vigilance. This is a tiny bit of tut-tutting and finger wagging. So you're now remote, and you no longer have the luxury of ignoring security hygiene. You need a password manager. You need two-factor authentication on everything, because right now everyone working from home is now at risk. It's like working studios, working with major licensors or intellectual property, and you're very easily hackable or phishable, and you need to defend yourself and make sure that doesn't happen. So the simplest way, and because ultimately you don't want to be responsible for an easily preventable data breach. I've seen that happen. I've seen the effect it has on careers. Whether it's their fault or not, their name's associated with it, and you don't want to be that person. So use a password manager. If you are not using a password manager, you're wrong. You're driving a coal-burning engine in the 21st century. Get a password manager, use 1Password, pay for it. It is critical life infrastructure in 2020. You only have to remember 1Password from now on, like a single password, and you just sign up for new websites and generate a unique new password you don't have to remember ever again. It's a small process tweak, and it'll save you a lifetime of nightmares. There's literally no excuse not to have it, and your company's IT departments will be demanding that you do it soon. So be ahead of the curve. Also, two-factor authentication. Don't use Google Authenticator. It does not back up, and it's not been updated in years. Use Authy, A-U-T-H-Y. It is free, and you can back it up across devices, because if you don't back it up across devices and you drop your phone in the toilet, you lose access to all of your accounts. So use Authy and back it up so you can recover it from another device. Whenever you sign up for a new website, if they give you the option to sign up for two-factor authentication, do it. Use the app if possible. Don't use SMS unless SMS is your only option, because that is less secure but better than nothing. Also, something that I do to silo all of my work, in addition to having like physically separated work areas and play areas, I have my own work user profiles. So whenever I start like a new job or a new contract, I create a new Gmail address, and I create a Google Chrome user profile, and I keep all of my all my unique extensions, bookmarks, whatever. Those are completely separate and siloed off from what I do for all my personal work. Never intermingle both of those. You don't want to accidentally see something you typed in your personal address bar pop up in a screen share because you forgot to delete your history. These things happen. Create the separate user profile and keep all of your work content in that, and set up two-factor authentication on that Google account to secure it. If you set up sync on that, it is and if you're using like Gmail and Google Drive, it's a very easy way to keep all of your work stuff separated and secure in a very simple and easy to share way that is free. So, and I really cannot emphasize this enough. This is not optional. You're going to be asked to do these if you have not already, and you need to do it anyway. Get ahead of the curve, be smart, distinguish yourself by being the person that cared about this first. Foresight. So there are all sorts of, you no longer have a facilities manager or an office manager or IT. So it's your hardware, it's your responsibility, and it's your little world of chaos. So you need to be able to plan for power outages or internet and cell service outages. So who's your cellular service provider, and what are their rates for tethering? For example, I use Google Fi, they're Google's cellular service provider, and they have a data plan that offers tethering for no extra charge. It just goes into my phone's data. And on many, many occasions, I've actually used a tether for doing live presentations, including live webinars off of my phones. My home internet was kind of wonky. Another thing about home internet, worth asking your employers about, find out if there is a higher speed that you can upgrade to, and see if your employer is willing to pay that, since you're working from home for now. Additionally, when I ran my company back in Austin, I used Time Warner Cable's business service, where they had higher speeds. I had a static IP address, and I had much better and more responsive customer support. Like within I think like half an hour response time to fix anything I needed. So if your home internet for consumer use is giving you issues, there are business options, and your employer may be able to help defray those costs. So take a look at that. Hard drive crashes. That absolutely happens. You need to get a hard drive backup solution. Whether it's just backing things up like a Mac Time Machine or Google Drive, find some way to make sure that if your computer explodes as you're using it, that not all will be lost, because you do not want to be scrambling to recover and create a plan after having needed a plan. Stolen hard drive and laptop, this sort of thing happens as well. Encrypt your drives, enable Find My Device, hospital or family emergency. Have a mechanism for quickly alerting your team, hey, things got real, I need the afternoon off. Actually, Chris Wren just before this mentioned that some of the teams he's talking to have created an out of office channel in Slack, where they say like, hey, gotta take the cat to the vet, or life things are happening, I'm out today. Having a dedicated channel for that is really important, because you don't want to be left scrambling. And non-specific hardware failure, just know what's in your know what your hardware is, know what's in your system, and know how to either fix, work around, or purchase a replacement in case those things happen. Because at a certain point, almost all of these things are going to happen. Plan for it now and have a basic plan ready before you need it. You'll look much smarter when everything goes crazy. And finally, regeneration, because self-care is absolutely critical. I cannot emphasize this enough. Have a dedicated workspace with explicit on-work and off-work hours. If you are working and playing in the same area, you will never fully be at work. You'll never fully be at home. You'll be stuck in a horrible purgatory, and you'll always feel like you're letting somebody down, or never fully doing what you want. I've gone down that hole. I've seen people go down that hole. Having a physical context switch is important, because your context switch previously was going into an office and commuting to work, and you don't have that commute anymore. You have a lot more time and a lot less separation. So I recommend creating daily rituals to separate yourself from work, like do yoga or stretches, walk a dog, hug a cat, cook a meal, take language lessons, Duolingo, create a Duolingo team for your coworkers, check your leaderboards and compete with each other to see who can learn a new language like the fastest or something. Do something that's outside of work. Listen to podcasts while you clean. My wife actually made a great point when I was running this presentation by her earlier. You no longer commute. You have a lot more time now. What can you do with that time? I like listening to the late night television in my headset while I'm cleaning the kitchen and cooking. And that gets me away from the computer. I'm physically separated from that space, and I'm better able to work because I create that space. Also, develop playlists for focusing at work, like playlists you only listen to when you're really rolling up your sleeves and just getting to it and really focusing. Don't listen to it when you're off work. Have that context switch that you can turn on and off. Don't be stuck halfway between those different states. So that was my presentation. Thank you so much for listening, and I am now ready to take questions. Chris.
Thank you very much, John. I can hear the virtual applause coming from all around the globe at the moment. I'm just going to hit the stop recording button here.
Sure.